Okay, so morning everybody. We're here to talk about energy saving tips for your home heading into winter. And just a reminder, I'm the chairman of Zero Carbon Yorkshire, and we put this event on as part of York Environment Week, and with support from the People's Postcode Lottery. Got some funding to do some events with them, so I'll run through that on the next slide. So Zero Carbon Yorkshire is a charity, and we exist to connect organisations across Yorkshire for the zero carbon effort. And our main activities are around engaging people through monthly newsletters, organising events such as this, particularly around the themes of buildings, food, transport and energy. As part of the Postcode Lottery bid, we will be refreshing our website, and there'll be 10 case studies about work we've been doing in Yorkshire. And that's our members that will be doing that work, and we'll be sharing those case studies up on our brand new website, which would be great. A quick introduction to myself. I am an accredited energy assessor. I started doing energy assessments in 2008. Since then, I've done, I think, around 1,000 energy assessments, but I'm only going to claim 700 now. I've worked in social housing, so I used to be an energy assessor for domestic premises. I also got my Green Deal badges at one point. So I've gone through a lot of these assessments in the past to look for energy saving opportunities, and I just want to share that knowledge with you as best I can, really. So today's outcomes, what I'd like to pass my knowledge on to you about is the price rise is coming. I think I'll get lots of questions at the end if I don't address it straight away, so we'll go through that first. I want you to be able to identify your kind of key equipment in your building, and make sure you know how to use it. And then I'm going to give you some tips about how to get help in paying your bills, and make sure you've got the kind of tools to know what to do in terms of investment, or just the free to do stuff as well. So just to address the energy price rises, some general points about this. So there are three main areas in regards to energy around price, security, and how sustainable it is. These three pillars are often referred to as the energy trilemma. And if you make changes in one area, it tends to affect the others. So in the current context, we've got an energy security issue with the situation in the Ukraine. And then also in terms of the kind of changes in policy that are happening in that kind of middle section there. Energy cost, if we have too much emphasis on sustainability or energy security, it will have implications on energy cost. If energy cost goes too high, we're going to end up with fuel poverty, which leads to excess winter deaths. That's not what we need, not what we want. And so that's got to be balanced against the other factors. I think I need to highlight, as clearly we're focused on the sustainability agenda, that in this current context, there is an increased risk that environmental issues will be sidelined to prioritise the other two. That's just the reality of the situation we're in, unfortunately. So some general points. Now, this is a very busy slide, so please come back and have a look later on the recording. But in essence, the wholesale cost of electricity and gas has gone up incredibly, unprecedentedly, if that's a word. So it's 400% in the last 12 months and 250% since January 22. Unprecedented. The Prime Minister has announced some support, which I'll deal with on the next slide. But as a result, the energy price guarantee has come in. That's 34 pence per kilowatt for electricity and 10 pence for gas. There's also standing charges there, which I won't read out. As a result, everyone will receive £400 in instalments over this winter's billing period for support. The calculations around how that kind of figure was come up with are in the top right there. So there's a kind of averaged data set there saying how much each type of house might use, what the price cap kind of looks like, and what the saving potentially is. If you're really interested in this, there are some links on the bottom so you can follow what's happening, and also the new announcements for when the price cap will be revised are in the bottom right for your reference as well. So this is a slide I've put together to try and explain the main changes that have happened recently. So the energy prices have gone up mainly due to wholesale price. So on the left-hand section under 2019, that's 100% of a typical bill in 2019, if that makes sense. Looking then at January 22, you can see that the wholesale cost has doubled. All the rest of the costs have stayed static. And this is what has led to the issues with energy suppliers going bust, because that wholesale price has pushed the total cost that needs to be passed on past that price cap level indicated by the red line. Suppliers weren't allowed to raise their price to meet their operational costs, and that's when energy companies started to fail. So the way they're addressing it now, it's a fourfold increase from that level in 2019, is the descoping of environmental schemes from consumer bills and putting that into the central coffers. VAT is still being billed, however, that's kind of being moved behind the line because of the price cap. So that's now below the zero line because the government's now picking up that tab, and supplier profit has gone. What's left is the operational cost of the distribution network operators and the suppliers. If they can't do that, they can't trade. So the government's supporting them to try and pick up that cost. So that's how I understand the current situation. I hope that makes sense. And please ask some questions in the chat if you want any clarification on that. In terms of the Prime Minister's solutions to longer term issues, I've colour-coded it by how compatible these particular agenda pieces are with our values. So clearly a new licensing round for North Sea oil and gas and lifting the moratorium on fracking are not compatible with our fossil fuel divestment efforts, and to try and have renewable sources. But that is the intention of this government. It's good to see that they're looking to drive forward alternative technologies, and also they're going to be reviewing the 2050 target to make sure they meet it. However, there is a little caveat that worries me slightly in terms of that economically efficient way, which is why I've highlighted neutral. There seems to be another focus again on nuclear. I'm not going to discuss my views on that, but it's kind of neutral as I see it at this point. It could help the energy mix without adding carbon. And then there's a fundamental reform to the structure and regulation of energy market. Well, that could be fantastic, or it could be horrific, and we don't know yet. So we'll have to see what they come up with. Before we get stuck in, Lucy, have you had any questions yet? I'm going to take that as a no.
There's nothing in the chat yet.
I've dazzled you into silence. So if I can get back to the main topic, I just wanted to address the price cap really early on. The biggest contributors to your energy bill are, on the next slide actually. So this in the context of home energy. So it's 21% of the UK's carbon load, and the other sectors are there for your information. The tips I give will be kind of from lowest cost up to highest cost as we move through the slides. But the main tips, the too long didn't read version, is keep heat sealed in where it should be and at the time it's needed. Only use your equipment when you have to, and use the most efficient devices you can afford. So that's the 1 minute version. So the average breakdown, 50 to 60% heating. So this is unashamedly heating biased, this presentation. We will get to the next through the next slides to the other areas. So we've got a breakdown there by kind of white goods, the washing machine, dishwasher, fridges and freezers, and then down to electronics, lighting, and then cooking. I've not put in many cooking tips as it's such a low load, but I have linked some extra resources you might want to refer to if you want to look at those. So at home, your main user is heating and hot water, and so having a focus on keeping that heat in is the priority. So before you start looking at efficiency opportunities, it's good to just reflect on what type of house you've got. So the advice that's on the internet is usually around the standard kind of 2 to 3 bed traditional build. Not all houses are like that. So the kind of standard advice is for a brick built 2-story cavity wall, double glazed and gas heated house, which is great unless you're in a electrically heated flat. We need to kind of cover that a little bit as well, make sure it's advice that's useful for every type of house. The other thing is that some issues with using certain measures in certain types of construction. So just understand how your house is made, and make sure that you take advice from experts around what are the best insulation methods in particular, so you don't get any issues with affecting your structure and condensation and damp and things like that. Some houses are very different. So there are some houses in my town of York that have steel, completely steel built, the ISF structures. Some are completely concrete, like the Orlit house down in the bottom right. So the solutions for that house are different to your traditional build, but the principles are the same. The other thing to note is there are modern methods of construction, such as prefabricated buildings and timber frames, which again, just seek advice on what the best methods are. The good thing about that is they're usually quite modern, factory made, so actually they're a pretty high efficiency already. So walls and roof first, fabric first approach. So walls and roof areas are part of that building fabric and should retain as much heat as possible. This is the reason I use a thermal mug in the previous slides to demonstrate that, keep that heat in. So traditional builds may have loft or cavity wall insulation. If you don't have it, you should definitely look at that. It's a real quick win in terms of just keeping that heat where it should be in terms of that first principle. So what that looks like is mineral wool, such as what that the guy in the high vis is rolling out, or in the top right slide in your cavity. Thermal board, such as Kingspan, which is probably the most well known, which the chap in the bottom left is putting on the wall there, and also in the cavity second down on the right. Or you can have blown or / injected kind of products, which are usually beads or a foam. This has become a little old hat, but it is good for retrofit. There has been some problems with this type of insulation, but thankfully the regulations have upped the quality of those types of installation. The bottom right picture is really to show that if you have these drill holes where the arrows are, then you probably have cavity wall insulation already. A good way to find out is to go into your loft space and try and look down that cavity to see what's in there. So non-traditional or older properties may have solid walls, and the only way to insulate those, because there's no gap, is on the inside or the outside. Outside is preferred because you have to move all your plug sockets, your skirting boards, your finishes inside, but it is much more expensive than cavity wall insulation. So they're the principles for walls and roofs. Your doors and windows. So gaps around your door will lead to heat losses. This is your cat flaps, your letterboxes, and bottoms, sides. So use a draft excluder if that's an internal door. You can get your children to make one. You can buy one off of Amazon or a local supplier. And you can also get draft stripping, which is more effective for external doors, because that's where your main heat loss will be. You can also replace your door with a more modern door, such as a composite door, which would normally be pre-insulated. And as a result, it's also more secure as well, because it's well sealed and with modern safety features. It can be expensive to replace that door. So the interim measures are get that draft stripping done. You can buy it yourself, or you can get kind of a handyman to do that. Windows. So make sure you can open and close them fully. The amount of houses that have painted shut windows, so you don't get the free ventilation, is quite shocking. You can use trickle vents, which are the second bottom picture, to help airflow. So that helps get in fresh air without having your windows fully open when your heating's on. So that allows that air change rate to happen, so you don't have the buildup of particulates and things like that, which can make you seasonally ill or kind of give you headaches and things like that. Don't forget to clean them. I hate this job personally, but if you clean your windows, you're maximising your natural lights, and then you don't have to turn your lights on as often, theoretically. And if you aren't double glazed already, please double glaze them. It's a really great way to save energy. It's around 20% for your windows in an average house. So if you double glaze your windows, you're going to keep that heat in. The kind of complexity comes in with listed buildings. If you have particularly kind of fitted windows, or if they're quite old, so they're part of in a conservation area, you may need to install secondary glazing, which is quite subtly done in the bottom right corner of the slide. And you can see it's sit into the frame. It's added a second pane of glass, but it's not actually replacing the windows, so it keeps it sympathetic to the existing building. And then use your curtains to provide that extra layer of insulation. It adds a little blanket to the inside of your windows, so you will feel a benefit from that in terms of comfort and potential energy savings as well. Heating boilers. So there are many types of boiler, too many to note, and also heating systems generally. But broadly, you will either have a conventional boiler, usually twinned with a water tank for your hot water requirements. That's in the top right-hand corner. Where if you have a flue out the roof like that, it's usually a back boiler, so it's behind your fire. So that's a conventional boiler. A combination boiler, bottom left, which is your modern equivalent, and that it combines the heating and the hot water for use. You can tell if you've got a combination boiler by looking at the flue there. You can see that it's got an in on the outside and an out on the inside. So that's a classic sign of a combination boiler. And then also we have electrical heating, so that can come in many forms. You can have a storage heater at the bottom left of the electric ones there, a convector, the middle one, or you can have a heat pump, and we'll come back to those later on in the presentation. So removing air from your heating system or bleeding your radiators can aid your circulation. That's the bottom right picture. You just need a key. They're quite common. You can buy them in many shops. And this helps get the circulation going better in your system if you get all the air out. Try not to dry your clothes on the radiators. It can lead to damp, but also it stops the radiators doing their job properly. It's not going to convect all that heat into the room. And then also use your controls. This is a key takeaway from the presentation. Please use your controls. Learn how to use them. If you're not confident, ask your service engineer. So get your boiler serviced. When you've got the opportunity with an expert in the room, ask them what type it is. Give it a Google. Get that manual. And also, there's been a few campaigns around setting to the lowest possible flow temperature. I support that, but I would ask your service engineer to do that personally. Make sure you're not going to fall foul of any circulation issues. And finally, insulate your pipes. This is quite common material available in B&Q, all the high street kind of handy shops. So buy some insulation, insulate your pipes, keep the heat where it should be. Controls and sensors. So controls are absolutely key, as I mentioned. They're your best way to save money, energy and carbon right now. So they come in many shapes and sizes, which makes it potentially very confusing, particularly if you're renting, you've moved into a new house and you've got a new control. Most homes now have a central control rather than just on the boiler. But some are still controlled on the boiler. Usually then it's an on-off function, but there is requirements for boilers, modern boilers, to have controls for time and temperature on them. So get familiar with those. If you're not sure, again, give it a Google, find the manual, ask your service engineer. Again, keep that heat where it should be at the time you need it. That's the key. Try to get comfortable changing those controls and realize that actually tweaking them every month is quite easy, and it will lead to savings. As it gets colder, you can put a half an hour on, an hour on, make sure it's meeting your demand, and you're warm enough. The advice is always to only heat to 19. That's warm enough, room temperature. And also then look at the kind of day specifics. So are you working from home certain days so you need it on, or is it days when everyone's out so you can turn it off? Program that in. And then just to note time changes as well, so you can set your programmer off, but make sure you check in on DST, daylight savings time, and that's 30th of October coming. So make sure you account for that and change your clock. Know how to change that one. My advice generally is to just buy the best controls for your system, and where you can, include those 7-day programs so you can set a different program for your weekends when you're in, or you're working from home day, etc. This is of particular importance, and also it will make the most savings in an electrically heated home. It's quite complex in terms of the charging up of the storage brick, and then the discharge in terms of fan assisted ejection. So making sure you've got good controls that work well. They charge it when it's cheap to do so as intended, and then they release at the appropriate time in the day is quite key, especially on electrical heating. Do we have any questions on that one, Lucy?
Sorry, not as yet. Although one from me, just wondering, I've got a combi boiler, and I've got it set to just hot water only, and at the moment, because I'm just wearing jumpers rather than putting the heating on, and it rumbles now and again. Is that is it worth just totally turning it off when you're out, or is that just not worth? It won't make much difference.
Yeah, so there's a couple of considerations there. So first of all, I would never recommend turning your boiler off completely, like isolating it at the board or anything like that, because if you get a particularly cold day, it can lead to burst pipes and things like that. So I'd always keep your frost protection on. In terms of the rumbling, it's likely just what's called cycling, or dry cycling if it's not going anywhere. So it's making sure that the water in the boiler is warm enough to be ready and reactive to whatever's required. It sometimes does this because it's smart. So you sometimes have like a smart programmer which knows that your water demands at, say, 3 o'clock. So at 2:30, there'll be a temperature check to see what temperature the water's at to make sure it's ready for 3 o'clock. So it could be a few things, but my hunch is that it's just dry cycling to make sure it's ready and up to temperature when you need it.
Great. Good to know. Sense? Thank you. Oh, we've got a question. Okay. Isolating your pipes. So you mean everywhere up to the radiators, i.e. under the floor, but also in the room if they are not plumbed under the floors? Yeah, definitely. So my background is mainly commercial buildings, and it's much more pressing there. So my advice is always start at the boiler. So the boiler has the highest heat temperature, highest temperature pipes. So again, we want to keep heat where it should be. So if you start at the boiler, insulate the pipework that leaves the boiler, and then work around the house. You can insulate even the pipework underneath the radiator up to the radiator. So only the emitter, the actual radiator itself, is being used, because that's how it should be. You also can get thermostatic radiator valves, those dials on the side, which I would count as one of these controls as well. So just making sure you're only getting the heat where you want it. If you've got a room that's too hot, turn that thermostat down, and yes, insulate those pipes going in and out of the radiator. In a home, it's usually a constant temperature, not a flow and return system. So if you don't demand the heat at a radiator, it will carry on to the next one. So, or it will sometimes go through the radiator at a lower, a lower output, if that makes sense. So, in essence, you can't completely isolate some radiators on your system, unfortunately, but you can insulate all the pipework up to it to make sure you're not losing heat where it shouldn't be lost. So the short answer is yes, I would insulate all the pipes you can, but start at the boiler and work your way around your house. I think that's answered it. Okay. I'll move on to hot water. So if you have a condensing boiler, it's likely that your hot water is achieved through the combination boiler or combi boiler. So if you have a tank, it's likely because of three reasons. You've got either an older system, such as a back boiler, and then the hot water tanks for your bath. The advice there is insulate it, and ideally replace it with a new prefabricated one that's pre-insulated, because you know it's a very good performance then, and there's no issues with losing heat from the bottom or an ill-fitting jacket. You could have a really high water demand. It's really unlikely in the domestic premises, but if you had a lot of bathrooms, you may have a high water demand and need that because of water availability. And then the third reason is that you have solar panels and you're using the tank as a thermal store. So all the electric you can't use is dumped into your tank and used to store energy or heat your water, so then it's useful. The controls are key on that, and also the advice is always insulate it to death and insulate all the pipes. You can actually see a pipe coming out the top of that tank. I would insulate that, and the pipes and the top right picture as well, I'd insulate those as well. It's less important to insulate the return pipe if in terms of the loop. But also, if you can insulate that, it returns at a higher temperature, so then less energy is used when it's on. So the more you insulate, the better, really. In terms of immersion heaters, so there's one on the bottom of this tank at the bottom. They're a great solution for summer heating or for non-heating hours boosts. So, for example, Lisa's mentioned that she's only got hot water on at the moment. If you could program your boiler to do that, that's great. But the immersion heat is a good option if you can set your timer clock to just come on for an hour when you're likely to have your shower or have your bath. Use those controls. So lighting electronics. I took this picture in Tesco's yesterday, and it's great to see we now have a good selection of LEDs on the high street and in supermarkets at a reasonable price. When I was looking at LEDs a few years ago, they were very expensive, and the dimmable ones still are. I did want to mention, though, that I have found some dimmable bulbs in Wilkinson's. So just in case you're looking for those, they're quite good there. Top tips on lighting. So maximize that natural light. It's free. Why not? And clean those windows again. Keep your lights and electronics off. So make it a habit to turn them on when you need them, not just to turn them on when you arrive or have them in standby modes by default. Use timer switches such as the one in the top right, and for those hard to reach areas. So if you've got some awkward plugs for your PlayStation or your digital box, plug it into one of these. It'll come on in the hours that you're awake, and it'll be available to you. And also the little switch on the side can just isolate it immediately if you know you're going away on holiday or you're not going to use it for a long time. Elimination of standby modes is quite a modest saving. It's in the order of pence per year, but aggregating all those items over many items can then lead to pounds. So do eliminate those standby modes. It will stack, particularly when there's high costs for energy at the moment. Do upgrade to LEDs. It's like I say, it's become much cheaper than it was a few years ago to do this, and they use around 5% of a classic compact fluorescent bulb. So you just need to get it done because it will pay for itself very quickly. And I mentioned Tesco and Wilkinson's. Obviously, other suppliers are available, but I know that these particular companies do have them. So do have a look and shop around. But if you needed a clue where to look, there's a couple of clues. So white goods. Again, this is all about controls and temperature and timer functions. So use those eco modes. And again, if you're really passionate about this, read the manuals, because you'll know what the difference is between doing a standard load and then an eco load. Also use out of hours washing and dishwashing. This is more of a cost saving thing than a carbon saving thing, but using your dishwasher and washing machine out of hours is cheaper to do. Sorry for the typo in this slide, by the way. So use a full load to be more efficient, to make sure they're nice and full, and then upgrade to more efficient models when you can or when you need to. So use condensing dryers and check those efficiency labels. There has been a big change in the last couple of years around efficiency labels because everything was getting A-star rated, which was misleading to consumers. So everything got rebased. So do check those. They were issued with energy labels, 2 energy labels for a while, but I think it's come to the new standard now. So we're not seeing as many A-star rated stuff anymore. Again, apologies for that typo. So a quick word on meters. So metering is great, but reading them is not. I haven't included any dial meters on this graphic because they're far less common now, but there is still some out there. They're really difficult to read. Know where your meters are and go read them regularly is my advice. And this will help minimize that shock to the family budget when you realize you've used more than you thought you might have done. Upgrade to smart meters if you can. So it helps just push that data to your supplier. All the suppliers I've ever used sort of host it on their website, so then you can interrogate it, have a look at how you're doing. And then it just helps spot that high use early, and particularly if you're not fond of spiders, not having to go in the gas cupboard every month is more pleasant. Also, if you have a prepayment meter, which is the one down the bottom right there, you can see like a USB stick type payment credit point there. Try and change it. They're notoriously expensive. They are going to get the same protection under the price cap as everyone else, but they are more expensive in the longer run. The justification from the suppliers is around the administration of the process, but if that's fair or not is down to your politics. And then also note that the Ofgem, the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets, has got some support specifically for prepayment meter kind of users. So I'll touch on that in the last slide or two, just to highlight that support. So quick summary of what we've kind of discussed. Check when your equipment was last maintained in terms of your service engineer coming round. Make sure you get their advice if you can. Add controls to everything and learn how to use them well. Use your supplier's website to track that energy use over time. Apply draft exclusion measures, fill those holes around your doors, around your windows, put your curtains over your windows, all that kind of stuff. Add insulation where you can to lofts and walls. It's a little bit of a capital expenditure, but you will get that money back quickly through savings in your bill. And then change light bulbs or fittings to higher efficiency ones. So a quick word on larger investments. I tried to focus
questions now, sorry, on that bit before.
Sure, yeah, I'll take some questions.
Could you explain what you mean by out of hours?
Yeah, so out of hours, I've used a bit of a commercial phrase there. So by out of hours, I mean when you're not intending to heat. So if you're out of the house or if you are sleeping and you prefer a cooler temperature, that's what I mean by that. So if you are if you're out of the house and you don't intend to heat the space at that time, that's out of hours in kind of commercial speak.
Okay, so putting your washing machines and stuff on it out of hours yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I'll go back to this meter slide. So on the second meter down on the right is a day and night rate meter. So the left hand read at the top is low, which is your night rate, and the top right is your normal, which is your day rate. Now, this is a specific meter with a specific tariff, usually for electrical heating. So you will get charged a lower rate usually on a normal bill as well, out of hours or after 7 in the evening, and before 5 in the morning. I will have to refresh that. But if you do things in those hours, they will be cheaper to operate. That meter particularly is for storage heating, so that low rate is significantly lower than the normal rate. So you can charge it with storage heaters in those hours, and then you can discharge them during the normal hours where you would have been paying much more. So that's what I mean by out of hours in that context.
So technically, if you put your washer on like after 7, it would be cheaper.
Correct.
But probably not before 5 in the morning, because that might be annoying.
Sticking on at 4. There is some appliances have timer delays where you can actually set them off at 4 in the morning if you're so inclined.
Does everyone benefit from out of hours? And does this enable smart meters enable this?
The smart meters aren't necessary, and that's just measuring what you're using. You have to check your tariff rate, but the majority of people will benefit from lower rates in the evening.
Okay.
Was there any more questions there, Lucy?
I think Claire had one, but I think it's been answered by the looks of it. It was about LED bulbs.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's been answered. She's saying that blue light bulbs are good for mimicking daytime light, although I regret not getting a warmer tone for a cozy evening.
Yeah. Yeah, the kind of colour of LEDs has definitely improved again in the last kind of few years. They're much more, much less harsh. There's a few different colour tones you can have rather than just blue. Okay, try and find where I was. I've gotten to larger investments, I think. Yeah, so heating system changes are expensive. It's, you know, it just is. Even if you just want a new boiler, you're looking at about £2,000. You will get a nice efficient boiler, but from an older boiler, you're only going to get a 5 to 10% efficiency benefit from that. Just to highlight some schemes that are happening. So the boiler upgrade scheme is happening, where you can replace your boiler with an air source heat pump. This is a particularly large one on the right hand side that would probably do a small commercial unit. But you can just get like a half-sized one that will do a house. The government will give you a £5,000 contribution to that, and that's up to April 25. So if you're thinking of replacing your boiler in the next couple of years, and you're looking to potentially upgrade to something a bit more innovative, a heat pump's definitely something to look at. The benefit of a heat pump is for every 1 unit of energy you put in, you get 3 out, whereas a boiler is usually around 90% efficient. So you put 1 unit in and you get 0.9 out because there's a loss in terms of efficiency. So heat pumps are far more efficient at heating homes than boilers. However, they're not very widely adopted, and you need to make sure you've got someone who can maintain it for you and make sure it's serviced well in terms of considerations. So renewables as well. I always say renewables are horses for courses. If you've got a south-facing roof, solar's a great solution. But if you have a big garden that you can trench, a ground source heat pump would also be equally as good for your property. I would plan those for the longer term. once you've made your savings from your other energy measures. But keep aware of those funding opportunities. And also, if you are looking at doing generation on site, such as solar panels, the battery storage solutions that are coming out are getting down to the home level, and they may help in boosting your own self-sufficiency. So if you're generating all your energy during the day, but you're out, you can store it for when you're actually going to use it on an evening for your lighting and your heating, for example. And just a quick couple of slides on resources. So please go to our website, join us if you haven't already. The Energy Saving Trust has been a great source of information for putting this together, along with the Ofgem website and the government website, to be fair. And then also that boiler upgrade scheme is linked there, and the energy bill support I mentioned first of all. So more specific support here. So the energy price guarantee, just a reminder, every household will receive £400 of support, and that will be in 3 or 4 payments around about £100. So if you want more details, that's linked there. And as I mentioned, the prepayment meters will get an equivalent scheme in terms of vouchers. There's also some long-standing ones that I know from when I was working in fuel poverty. So there's a warm home discount, which you can apply to the supplier for, and you can get that if you're in receipt of pension credit or you're in a low income household. If you were born before 1956, you can get the winter fuel payment, which is a top up to help you with your bills as you're more vulnerable to the cold. And also you can get a cold weather payment if it's particularly cold, i.e. 0 degrees or less, between the 1st of November and the 31st of March every year. So just be aware of those and make sure if you're eligible, you're claiming that support. The Priority Services Register, so this is linked to the prepayment meters as well. But if you have one of these factors, so if you have a medical condition, you're pregnant, you have children under 5, you're over 65, or English is not your first language or not your best language, you can ask to be put on the Priority Services Register with your supplier. And that means that in essence, you can't be disconnected, and you'll be supported with with payment plans if they're needed, because you've got vulnerable people in your house. In terms of prepayment meters, the Ofgem rules mean suppliers must offer payment plans that are affordable, and emergency credit will be issued, not rather than can. So in essence, you can't be cut off because, again, you're potentially a vulnerable customer. The typical demographic of people with prepayment meters is people with low incomes. You can also get then a free gas safety check if you're on this register as well. So there's some support there for these more vulnerable people. And that's it from me for now. And I'll take any questions now if anyone's got any.
I've got a question. So I was wondering how easy it is to find out about schemes. For example, in Leeds, we had the Better Homes Yorkshire scheme, which was offering free installation and solar panels. This is unfortunately now ended, and they're not quite sure when the next scheme is going to happen. But when you go on Facebook, you're kind of bombarded with all these kind of too good to be true looking scheme adverts, which I usually ignore. But I guess how do you kind of find out about these things? Because I think it obviously differs from council to council. Yeah,
definitely. So it's changed a lot since I kind of moved away from home energy the last 3 or 4 years or so. Better Homes Yorkshire was the leading scheme in Yorkshire then, but we also had national schemes such as ECO that would fund these types of measures, particularly for lower income households. Checking the council websites is the best place to kind of get this kind of information. However, we're committed with our website refresh at Zero Carbon Yorkshire to create a members directory and also create those links to those kind of funding options that are available to everybody. So do check in on our website in the next month or two as this develops, and there'll be signposting to relevant funding pots and organisations that can assist.
Great.
I'm hoping that the government does introduce a replacement for the energy company obligation and other kind of funding streams that were performing well, in my view, over the last few years.
Rachel's got a hand up. Rachel?
I was just wondering if there were grants available for houses which already have old wooden doors and things, or which have PVC windows that have failed. Is there anything available? Because in rented properties, the landlords are very reluctant to do it, shall we say?
Yeah. There's none that I'm aware of. But again, I would put all that information on our website if we found that.
Well, I'll let you know if I find any then.
There's two issues there. I
do.
think the first one is that a kind of door replacement hasn't historically been seen as an energy efficiency improvement, but as I've alluded to in my kind of presentation, it clearly is, because it's covering a gap in the fabric of the building. So
I think when you can see daylight through the doors,
yeah.
through the gap, it's yeah.
So there's that issue, but also particularly in private rented sector, the council funding doesn't tend to kind of cover that, or even the energy suppliers obligations. So it tends to be just focused on homeowners and or social tenants. The kind of private sector is a relatively neglected area in terms of energy efficiency. Right, probably, well, wrongly, definitely in my view, but yeah, that's just the way it's kind of been. I do think that the government could be doing more potentially in terms of match funding for that type of scheme where the tenants are going to benefit from an improvement. But then the landlord doesn't have to put all of the bill for an indirect benefit to them.
Yeah, because they used to fund it about I worked for a solar panel factory, and we were dealing with private landlords who were getting grants and things at the time. I think it was Renewable Energy Association, and there was that support there at the time. I was hoping there'd be something that was still available, but don't think there is.
Nothing I'm aware of. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going back to mute. Thank you, though.
Okay, and there was a little bit of an issue with working in that area because, in essence, the tenant qualified for the funding, but the landlord got the benefit in terms of a more efficient home, which quite often led to then rent rises. So, yes, the tenant was warmer, but then they were probably paying more for the privilege. So, there's lots of questions around how effective that is and how fair that is in the private rented sector. Was there any more questions, Lucy?
Oh no, just got some thanks there. Yeah, just to say that, yeah, we will, if we find anything. So if you sign up to the newsletter or become a member, you'll get the newsletter automatically, and we put anything like that out in the newsletter that we know of. So that goes out monthly. So we'll try and keep you posted. Claire, have you got a question?
Yeah. I'm in this debate with my partner at the moment about insulation and flooring. So we've just got exposed subfloors, and I'm saying we should lift the subfloor, like lift the floors up, put insulation down, and then actually insulate the pipes and stuff. Now that's come up, but she really just wants to do something that's less intrusive and messy, and so she's talking about underlaying carpet. Now I think you'll probably say that doing all of it is the best, but is putting carpet down, do you think that'll like be a good enough job to make a real difference?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I presume it's suspended timber, your floor, so it is difficult to get under there and it is messy, but it's passive, would be the counterpoint that once it's in there, it's there and it's doing its job. So you lose typically 5 to 10% of your heat load through your floor. It's going to be more if you've got a suspended timber floor with air bricks, because it's going to just have a flow rate through. You're going to get drafts through your floor. So if you've got that situation where you've got drafts, then clearly insulating under it would be best. However, the underlay and the carpet will help with the drafts. So actually it will have a benefit. How much that benefit is really does depend on how drafty that is. But it will have some thermal benefit to your home. So yeah, I guess good luck in negotiating your preferred option. But the carpet will actually give some benefit.
We've had a question. Can't you lift a small section and blow in loose fill insulation?
Yes, you can. But the kind of gap is quite significant in some houses. So it could potentially be quite expensive to do that. And it's only 5 to 10% of your heat loss through your floor. You're better off putting that effort, if you haven't already, into your loft or your walls.
Has anyone got any other questions before we? I will be sending this YouTube out, and I think you're going to send me the presentation. Is that right, Luke? To send out so people can get the links off that as well.
I will correct my typos before I send it out.
But that'll go out to everyone anyway, so you'll get all the links that are in the presentation and the video as well. And feel free to obviously pass those on. They're going to be on our YouTube channel. So there's quite a few videos, quite useful videos, a lot more deeper videos on retrofit and things like that from events that we've done before. So do sign up to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. So they should have a look on there. There could be things that you are interested in as well. I think that looks like it, Luke.
Thanks, Lucy. On that, thanks everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, Luke. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'll end it.